General Assembly Joint Subcommittee on Program Open Space and Agricultural Land Preservation. I'm Senator Ron Young, co-chair of the committee. Delegate Jim Gilchrist, the other co-chair, is here. We will turn it over to him for remarks if he'd like in a few minutes. Want to call the meeting to order, but first, as part of that, I'd like to introduce our two staff members from DLS. The rest we will introduce as their section of the program comes up to speak. So we have April Morton from DLS here and Andrew Gray from DLS. We also have Senator Ellis with us and Senator Edwards. And we have Delegate Dana Stein. And I guess that is it as far as the General Assembly at this point. We may have someone else join us as we go along. We have three presentations today from Agriculture, Natural Resources, and the Department of Planning. So we generally meet live. This has been a very, very different year, having our meetings virtually. For those of you watching, we welcome you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to, where are you there? James Mckittrick from DNR, who's going to take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. For the record, James Mckittrick, Legislative Director for the Department of Natural Resources. Just wanted to say thank you to the co-chairs and the subcommittee membership for this opportunity to provide an annual update on Maryland's land preservation programs. Quick thank you as well to Andrew Gray and April Morton for facilitating our presentation today. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. It's been a strange year, but progress continues towards our goal in land preservation despite challenges posed by the state of the nation's economy, as well as the necessity of telework and similar precautions taken by our partners in the private sector. Above all else, the silver lining of the current state of the nation appears to be that outdoor space would seem to have never been more popular in the eyes of the public. I think this fact speaks to the importance of our current programs, particularly as the General Assembly approaches its consideration of the fiscal 2022 budget in January. With the virtual table, or at the virtual table with me today from DNR is Phil Hager, who's our Assistant Secretary for Land Resources. From MDA, we have Steve Connolly, Assistant Secretary for the Office of Marketing, Animal Industries, and Consumer Services. Also from MDA, we have Michelle Cable, the Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation. And last but certainly not least, from the Maryland Department of Planning, we have Valdis Lasdens, Assistant Director for Planning Services, and Jason Dubo, Manager of Resource Conservation and Management. We have the committee's topics and questions in hand, and we'll kick it off with the Maryland Department of Agriculture.
James, can I cut in for 1 second?
Sure.
I naturally had to do something wrong. I skipped over giving co-chairman Jim Gilchrist an opportunity to say something if he'd like.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome everybody here today, and I'm glad we're able to do this remotely like we can during this epidemic. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, and back over to you.
Okay, James, back to you.
All right. Well, I think our first requested update relates to the Maryland Agriculture and the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So I'll leave it to them to address it.
As James introduced me, I'm Steve Conley, Assistant Secretary for Marketing, Animal Industries, and Consumer Services at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Just want to go through fairly quickly the state of Maryland agriculture and how it is faring in the pandemic. As many of you are aware, agriculture was deemed an essential industry during the pandemic. Our food producers, frankly, didn't really miss a beat. They were out there working 365 days a year, producing food products. However, the food supply system, transportation and processing did have some major hiccups, especially in the very beginning of the pandemic. A lot of that had to do with the fact that a large portion of their markets were closed down, and that includes restaurants and institutions such as schools. So there was a need to have a shift from institutional type food delivery and supply to more consumer-based at grocery stores. The current national forecast, which we tend to follow in Maryland, for total receipts for farmers will decrease about 3.3% in 2019. And the folks that are going to take the biggest hit are our animal and animal product producers. They're looking at about an 8.1% decline. And this is from broiler chickens, hogs, cattle, and dairy. Total crop receipts are actually expected to increase slightly across the country. Our poultry industry is our number one value industry in Maryland, as well as our neighboring state of Delaware. It's really sort of like one industry for both states that are number one. And it actually had some supply processing problems. We had one slaughter plant in Delaware that had either employees that were COVID positive or were fearful of becoming COVID positive, and they had to cut back their actual operation of the processing lines. Unfortunately, the chickens don't stop growing, and we had some major problems in that area. I'm sorry for the dog. So the poultry industry to deal with this slowdown of production either had longer layouts between flocks, which affect growers, and also lowered the number of birds that they placed in houses to try to adjust their supply. Our dairy industry also took a major hit during the beginning, especially the first quarter of the year, when we had to shift from institutional processing for milk, going into things such as about 25% of our the milk in the country goes into cheese manufacturing, and usually into 40-pound blocks or 550-pound barrels of cheddar. And that market disappeared without the restaurant trade and the institutional trade. Dairy prices in the beginning of the year collapsed pretty dramatically. One of the positive things for Maryland, though, is we did, through the governor and the legislature, provide some protection. And under the USDA's Dairy Margin Coverage Program, we paid for the premiums for that program, and our farmers in Maryland received about $2.8 million in payments for being signed up for that program. Our neighboring states, I think, were kind of envying that. Corn and soybeans really were not affected greatly in the beginning of the pandemic because of our growing season. Really, we don't start planting corn until April, and a little bit later than that, planting soybeans. Some folks that may have had corn or beans in storage had some negative effect, but there's a federal program that helped to cover that. Our specialty crops also, in the beginning, because of our growing season, there was not a great amount of specialty crops available for sale from Maryland, but they certainly were affected by not having access to the restaurant trade as well as institutional food trade. We were able to to keep our farmers markets open, our pick your own operations open. And however, they had to follow some strict COVID protocols for social distancing, personal hygiene, and being careful, face coverings, and being careful not to spread this disease. Just to give you an update, the United States Department of Agriculture through the Farm Service Agency rolled out a program. It's the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program to help producers. It really focused on from April 15th to, from January 15th to April 15th for dairy farmers, livestock producers, crop growers, growers of specialty crops, aquaculture, and nursery. And there were payments to Maryland producers of almost $24 million. That program's known as CFAP 1. It's 50% of the money went to our dairy producers. And that program ran through September 11th of 2020. And then on September 20th, USDA rolled out CFAP 2, a little bit different structure, but it has already put out a little over $34 million to Maryland farmers. On top of that, we received some CARES funding to try to help our poultry growers. The poultry growers were exempt from being able to participate in the CFAP 1 or CFAP 2 program. USDA determined that since they did not own the chickens and they did not have price risk, that they were ineligible for the CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. We rolled out this program about 4 weeks ago. In our neighboring state of Delaware did the similar program where we are, and we're actively taking applications right now for contract poultry growers. We're giving $1,000 per house up to 5 houses, and there were 58 houses that were depopulated because they could not manage the supply of the birds. They're getting an additional $1,500 a house. That program's it will cost right around $2 million. And we are also in the process of accepting applications for a bonus program, looking at CFAP payments from Farm Service Agency and giving a 15% bonus because of supply chain disruptions and decline in prices. That program will cost right at about $4 million from CARES Act, federal CARES Act dollars. That we are getting quite a few applications. I think we'll be close to full subscription of the poultry growers, and I probably talked to 150 farmers in the last 3 weeks about the helping them with their CFAP bonus applications. So I think that it's a mixed bag, but I think that Maryland farmers with the federal and state assistance have up to this point have weathered the pandemic storm fairly well. That's not to say that there aren't individuals that had even greater difficulties that we haven't been able to address. So I think I'll wrap that up and take your questions. Senator Young, I can't hear you.
At the end.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh. As far as the farmers are concerned, did you have requests beyond the money that we had appropriated? How did that go in terms of the help they needed?
Well, I think our dairy farmers had signed up for the DMC program. The ones I've talked to said that it was really, they're just very glad that we paid the premiums for 2020. They weren't expecting prices to decline, and it's really a risk management tool, and that's for times when you're not expecting things to go wrong. The CARES Act money comes from the federal government, so we are just in the midst of accepting applications and making payments, and the checks have started going out to farmers already. Haven't heard any complaints that it wasn't the right amount of money, or I think most farmers are pretty appreciative right now on what they're receiving.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, well, I guess if there's no other questions for Steve, thank you very much, Steve, for that. We're going to jump in here now to a question that the Joint Subcommittee had asked regarding revenue and programmatic impacts on program open space and agricultural land preservation. And before I kick it over to Phil Hager on our team, DNR's team, I should say, and then Michelle, I do want to say, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, despite everything from, teleworking to, stay-at-home orders, everything like that, we've been able to adapt very quickly at DNR and even excel. Both program open space, rural legacy, program open space stateside, and local. So,
I'm going to go ahead and jump in now. James, did you finish?
all you, Phil.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Chairman Young, Chairman Gilchrist, committee members and staff. Thank you for holding this meeting today. As James mentioned, my name is Phil Hager. I'm the Assistant Secretary at Department of Natural Resources. I'm very pleased to be in this capacity. It's been an interesting challenge for me on a personal note, because I started and then 2 weeks later we went into the shutdown mode. So it's been it has been very interesting, and it's probably an understatement. But I think many of us during this time period have encountered many different challenges of a personal as well as a professional nature. And I'm very pleased to at the way that the staff and the leadership at the Department of Natural Resources has responded to the particular challenges that we've had with regards to keeping all of our programs moving forward in spite of the challenges represented by this pandemic. We've done so at the local level as well as at the state level. I will share a couple interesting facts with you, or statistics rather. From the end of July, from July to the end of October, the Board of Public Works has approved projects protecting more than 1,100 acres of land, totaling more than $5 million. This is a 22% increase in the amount of acres protected versus last year, and represents an increase of nearly 50% of the funding that was approved during the same period last year. I'm pleased that we have a healthy pipeline of projects and foresee this trend continuing into the future. Having to conduct business virtually, it required some retooling at first, and we encountered, of course, a few bumps in the road. However, I'm proud to report that the implementation through electronic applications like DocuSign and other things like that have helped us to regain and surpass actually our schedule. On the local side, local jurisdictions continue to support programs, and they continue to submit applications for new projects and to request reimbursement for previously approved projects. During the same period, July through the end of October, the Board of Public Works approved $17.7 million for 55 projects for POS Local. This represents an increase of 31% over the same period last year. Our Rural Legacy program remains strong. Demand from local property owners for this particular program continues to grow. On October 21st, the Board of Public Works approved the recommended FY21 package of grant awards, including nearly $20 million for 17 individual rural legacy area easements. This is a clear indication of the program's continuing success and the importance and viability that it is seen both statewide and locally. If anything further is needed on this, the fact that we had $117 million worth of requests for 27 projects is a clear illustration of that fact. So we're pleased about that. Another thing worth mentioning with regards to rural legacy is the fact that we reviewed and approved requests to expand the geographic boundaries for 5 different existing rural legacy areas. This will help to ensure that we continue to have a positive trend of new acquisition requests into the long-term future. With regards to impacts of the pandemic on the transfer tax, the Department of Natural Resources does not collect the transfer fee. Therefore, we cannot provide any updates with regards to the impact that the pandemic may have on revenues. We would defer that topic to DBM or to the Board of Revenue estimates. I'll stop there on that topic for questions if there are any. Thank you.
All right, Michelle.
Great, thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Michelle Cable. I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, or what we all call MELF. Thank you for having us here today, or here today virtually. Thank you for all the committee members. I think I'll start up where Phil left off about the revenue. And there is actually one little different piece of information that the Department of Agriculture does collect that the Department of Natural Resources doesn't, and that is about the agricultural transfer tax. And while that is not the fund of the transfer tax that goes into the program open space formula, it is an indication of the strength of the real estate market that has been surprisingly very robust during this pandemic. And with that strength of the real estate market, indications do show that there will be, the estimates probably are going to be met for the funding for the POS formula. So it's just a comparison for the agricultural transfer tax and surcharge. When you look at the end of fiscal year 19 to the end of fiscal year 20, we've actually collected $1 million more in the agricultural transfer tax than we did the previous year. So there has been quite the robust market there. But as Phil said, for the specifics of the actual transfer tax revenue, referring to the Board of Revenue Estimates or the Department of Budget and Management will have the most accurate information. So on the programmatic side for MALF, as with everyone else, we have made adjustments to continue our program successfully. There's a first few months are a little more challenging as we got our feet underneath us. But we have been able to continue with both our new easement acquisition cycle as well as our ongoing stewardship and enforcement matters. It's a constant process, and always being able to find new workarounds that we didn't ever originally expect for this program. One of the more challenging aspects to any of these programs, and I'm sure Department of Natural Resources had the same thing for all of our acquisitions, these are real property transactions that have to be recorded in the land records. So we actually have to have live signatures for the documents that get recorded. So working out the process of getting live signatures to be notarized from the state officials that the land records will accept did take a little creative thinking, but between mailing and staff delivering back and forth, we have found a system that is working. And we foresee that we'll be doing that for quite a few months, obviously. The other piece of the challenging process that we had to work through on a practical side was how do we continue actual farm visits safely, both for staff members as well as for the farm owners. So the first couple months of, March and April, all of the Department of Agriculture, except for emergency visits, we were not doing farm inspections. And then each of the programs has developed a process to ensure safety for both the staff as well as for the landowners. And once that got in place, it has continued to go forward following just a little bit safer measures than has been in the past. So otherwise, our biggest change for MALF going, not just the pandemic, but from the last few years, is continuing to move back to the annual application cycle. That increase of work, or the increase of the applications, we roughly get 200 a year now, starting in 2019, instead of 200 every other year. So we are definitely staying very busy, and just working a little differently now, but still hopefully providing good service to the farm owners of Maryland and continue to move forward. So I am available for any questions.
I see Senator Ellis has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Cable. Quick question. When you said something went to 200 a year, could you clarify what that is? Thank you.
Sure. And that's a rough estimate. We accept new easement applications from all of the counties now once a year, starting in fiscal year 19. We went back to accepting applications every year, returning to full funding of that transfer tax formula through the program open space funding. Prior to that, from the previous decade, we were accepting applications every other year. So while we have roughly received somewhere in the high hundreds to low 200s applications per cycle, that cycle is now every year instead of every other year. So we are having a more consistent application cycle for the landowner, so they can plan on it instead of having an every other year having to wait if they get in that off year. So it's just an increase of volume with the annual application cycles being submitted.
This is Senator Young. I would like to note that Senator Edwards got back in, and that Senator Gallion has joined us. So welcome.
All right. I'll turn it over to the Maryland Department of Planning to talk about the preservation goals set by Senate Joint Resolution 10.
Great. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Val Lasdens, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Maryland Department of Planning. And many of you probably know that Senate Joint Resolution of 10 of 2002 sought to protect a little over 1 million acres of agricultural land in Maryland, 1,030,000 acres to be precise, by 2022. And this was to be done through 4 programs: the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, MALF, Rural Legacy Program, local county preservation efforts, and Greenprint. It's important to point out that Greenprint hasn't been active for the last 15 years or so. So the Maryland Department of Planning's role in this entire process has really been more of a scribe. We've documented progress towards the preservation goals. And additionally, we took initiatives to prepare a Maryland Protected Lands dashboard, and that was done in coordination with the DNR and MALF, and that's updated quarterly. So accordingly, the 4 programs that I mentioned earlier have currently preserved 690,939 acres of land, or 67.1% of the goal. Adding into that, the Maryland Environmental Trust lands, 829,491 acres have been preserved, or about 80.5% of the goal. So to reach statewide preservation goals in 2 years, including the MET lands, 200,509 acres still need to be protected. And that would require adding about 100,254 acres annually for the 2-year period. Without including MET lands, about 169,531 acres would need to be placed under easement annually for 2 years. So over the past 5 years, about 71,500 acres were preserved through the participating programs. That includes MET, or about 14,300 acres annually. So clearly the goals will not be reached during this 2-year time frame. And as our agency, MDP, suggested last year, it would be appropriate to extend the goal to 2040. That should be considered, and we stand ready to assist DNR and MDA in others in such a process. So any questions on that? Again, our role is mainly as a reporting agency here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just interested why you picked 2040.
I believe that that would at least give some time to reach that goal. It would be an extended time period, but it would get us closer to the goal acreage during that period.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions on this, we can bump it over back to Team DNR. Oops, I guess we still have a couple pages. Planning, were you finished?
Yes, yeah, that was just a supporting documentation that
All
was
Just
shared with everyone.
Just following April's presentation. Phil Hager, you're up on the LPRPs.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. In response to the question that was raised about the local parks and recreation plans, we're currently in the 5-year phase, which is covering the years 2017 through 2021. It's important to note that these plans are developed by the local jurisdictions for their own use, and that the goals that are included in these plans are developed by the local governments based upon their unique set of needs and characteristics. Some of the things that they look at and that they base their goals upon are based on population density, the demand for services, the physical distribution of facilities, just to name a few. So obviously it's easy to see why they might vary considerably from one jurisdiction to the other. Program Open Space Local is a reimbursement grant program which DNR administers. And of course, it's one of the key ways that local governments are able to fulfill the goals that they have identified in these local plans. I just want to mention that today at the Board of Public Works, $10 million of new projects, grants were approved for Program Open Space Local. So it was a very big day for us today. It's a well-used program. Our local governments are quite familiar with it and have been administering it, and it's been very, very successful. It's a great example of state and local participation to fulfill multiple goals. But to be eligible for these grants that we were just talking about, there has to be a request, and that request needs to be consistent with the local recreation plan, the LPPRP. And as I noted, the goals and objectives in those plans are locally determined, and those local governments have an opportunity to adjust, refine, or even substantially change every 5 years. So with regards to some of these things, I wanted to mention that we're currently in the process of updating the guidelines that will be utilized in the next phase of LPPRPs. We're working on this in conjunction with the Maryland Department of Planning and also with local governments. One of the things that we're focusing on in terms of restructuring the goals is the idea that there needs to be a clear and observable relationship between projects and funding. And one of the ways that we're hoping to achieve this is through enhanced reporting. We're encouraging the inclusion of a spreadsheet in their plans for the local governments that that would enable this data to be displayed very easily in a tabular form. One of the things that this will do, it will encourage local governments to think and to engage, not just in terms of what they're hoping to achieve in this 5-year period, but the actions and resources that are actually going to be needed and by whom in order to achieve those needs. So we're very excited about how it's been working. We're excited about how it can work in the future. And that's the status with things right now. So we're really excited. And I think that most of our local governments are taking full advantage of this program. Are there any questions on the LPPRP?
I see Senator Gallion has his hand up.
Thank you. This probably would go to the prior segment, but I just had a question on the goals and the funding for those. Is there enough funding there to accomplish that goal of the amount of acres you'd like to get? And if not, is that why that goal is being pushed out so far, all the way to 2040?
I believe that question is going back to MDP, I would assume.
Yes.
You know, with the question of funding, again, we're a reporting agency on this, and the way that the time frame was extended, just looking at historically how much land has been preserved annually, and then just extrapolating that out to come closer to the stated goal of the 1,030,000 acres. I really don't have an answer for you regarding sufficiency of funding, though. That's not something that our agency has been looking at.
Okay. I'm just assuming there's probably, quite a waiting list of farmers that would like to have ground preserved. I know here in Harford County, we have a really good local program, and there's a great process, and there's a lot of people that are turned away for in many cases many years. So as far as the goals go, I'm thinking it must be more a funding issue than a want on the part of the farmer to actually get their farms in these programs.
I saw that Jason Dubois popped up for a second. Jason, do you want from our agency? Is there anything that you could add to that?
I think that Senator Gallion's point is probably the issue. I would think that James and Phil and Michelle will be able to speak best about the demand versus the dollar amounts. But my sense is that what Senator Gallion is saying is probably what's happening.
I can speak from mouth. This is Michelle again, but I would concur with both what the Senator and Jason said. We have a very long waiting list, and as Phil had said, with Rural Legacy, there's millions of dollars and lots of interest with the landowners, and the limiting factor is funding, and then just the time to process each of the transactions. So there's a high demand. I know we only end up having funding for about half the applications that we get each cycle, when these past few years we've been in the mid $40 million, mid to high $40 million range, and we get about half. We're able to extend easement offers to about half of the applicants that apply, and we limit the number of applicants because we know that it is not because of the limited funds. So there's definitely interest, but there is not unlimited funding.
Okay, so in other words, if the funding was there, the interest would be enough that you could meet those goals a lot quicker than 2040.
We would be able to move. We would definitely have the interest of the landowners. If we got a vast inflow of money, we would definitely need to increase staff resources to be able to handle all of the new transactions. But the landowners would love it. Yes.
Thanks a lot.
I see Delegate Stein has his hand up, and Senator Ellis, yours too. So Delegate Stein first.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. it was mentioned earlier that during the pandemic, there's been a lot more use of parkland recreation facilities. And so I realize the next LPPRP for each county isn't due for a couple of years, but do you have any sense as to whether this increased demand for, for park services, recreation services is going to have an impact on how counties plan in the future?
I think, Delegate, that it's unquestionably going to have an impact. I think it's an excellent question. We're seeing some of that now. In the next segment, I had been going to discuss a little bit our park equity tool, and also some of the usage levels that have been occurring, particularly at our parks. And although I'm prepared to talk about the state parks, we are clearly seeing a corresponding increase in use at local parks and local recreation facilities as well, as the conditions associated with the pandemic have continued. And many of these things are definitely going to cause people to be looking both at the state level and also at the local level at enhancing existing facilities through opening additional portions of parks that may not be already developed, or adding equipment or trails or other types of things to expand the ability for more people to utilize local parks as well as state parks and other facilities. But this increased use is also going to have an impact upon the cost of maintaining the programs, as well as the cost of actually funding the improvements that are going to take place. And all of these things are going to place an increased demand upon our various pots of funding. Mr. Gillian's question a moment ago does not, clearly, because there's so many different programs that are all designed to do different things that have similar impacts, and each one of them has access to different funding sources. So the answer to that question is very challenging. The answer to this question is also going to be challenging as we move forward, because different parts of the country, or excuse me, different parts of our state are going to be impacted in different ways. But one of the things that we are wrestling with is the idea that as social justice issues and as increased usership of our parks increases, particularly in the central portions of our state, it's going to translate into a greater demand for acquisition in the center portion of our state. That's an area that is already under high competition for land, and that's going to translate into higher costs of acquisition for parks and other facilities into the future. So the success that we've had this past year in terms of increased patronage and camping opportunities is also a double-edged sword, because it's going to, it clearly points us in the direction of where we want to go and where we need to fund moving forward. But that's also going to increase our costs.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hager, you segmented into my questions so well, and welcome to your new position. I just want to, you're welcome. Just you spoke about the social justice consciousness and desire for more open space parks in the central part, and there are more suburban, how should I say, denser populated regions of the state. And so I'm in Southern Maryland, I'm in Charles County, and Charles County is probably like the 5th largest counties in Maryland land-wise. Population-wise, we're like under 200,000. So it's a sparsely populated. We've taken advantage of a lot of these projects, except when it comes to the program Open Space Local. My first year in, got a report, and every project in Charles County was in the very rural agricultural area. We have the city of Waldorf in Charles County, which population is 74,587. It's a kind of dense area. That's our suburban, urban area. And would you believe that entire area has zero parks? And so I've been working with DNR, and Mr. Mckittrick will tell you, I've been talking to him about, the DNR responsibility to work with the counties, because you mentioned something about the criteria for some of these open space local monies. We should look at the population areas and density. And it seems like in my part of the state, that's not being done, and no one is being held responsible to those standards. Could you address that from your perspective, please?
I'd be pleased to. In fact, perhaps it might make sense for me to go ahead and jump into my next presentation, unless we had other speakers with questions. And if I don't answer your questions, Mr. Ellis, I'll be happy to attempt to do so at the conclusion.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. And I also want to underscore the fact that we have program open space, local as well as state. One is targeted at assisting local governments with fulfilling their identified goals, and the others with the state. It's oversimplification, but essentially that's correct. So the pandemic has served to also highlight environmental justice and equity concerns. We've had a vivid illustration of that, not that we needed one, of the critical nature and the importance that parks and outdoor recreation play in terms of both physical as well as mental health. We are proud of our parks, forest, wildlife heritage areas, all of us at DNR who have served a role in helping people get outside and enjoy the natural resources of our beautiful state. We're proud to have been part of providing that service to the residents. During the epidemic, our parks remained open. And it may not be that much of an exaggeration to call our efforts life-saving, as we have received visitorship in terms of numbers that have been absolutely off the charts. And with the increased problems associated with mental health and suicide and other types of issues that seem to have increased as a result of the conditions associated with COVID-19, I think it's been very, very important for us to have an opportunity for our residents to get outside and to enjoy opportunities to get in touch with something different than some of the problems that are affecting them personally. I'd like to take this opportunity just to share some statistics with you. Through the end of October, we've had more than 18 million visitors to our parks in Maryland. We have had more than 270 capacity-related closures, and our visitorship has exceeded more than 20% what our numbers were for last year. Now, as I said, these numbers are just through the end of October. These trends continue. We have never had a year prior to this one where we had any park closures related to capacity after Labor Day. Yet this year we've had nearly 24 capacity related closures continuing into the fall. In fact, just last week we had some as well. One wouldn't think so with the cooling off of our temperatures, but our parks continue to be very, very popular. And our visitorship is not just for our day use facilities that we have seen impact. It's also been for camping. Our camping it's been very, very difficult to find vacancy at any of our parks that have camping facilities throughout the state virtually all year. I'd also like to cite two examples that help to illustrate what's been going on. Sandy Point State Park and Patapsco State Park, they both serve extremely diverse populations. They're in the central portion of our state. They've been two of our busiest parks. Between the two parks, they have experienced no less than 73 capacity related closures. So that just means that we have more people coming to those parks than we can handle, and we're having to shut down to prevent overcrowding of those parks. So it's clear that there's a great deal of popularity. The same type of thing we're told is being experienced at the local level throughout the state, with parks of all shapes, sizes, and configurations. So it's clear that people are taking advantage of these facilities. Knowing that and knowing that needs to continue, we have to make sure that we're on top of our game to continue to be able to provide those facilities. As we are growing in terms of being aware of these trends, we're also trying to put some of those lessons learned into our operational planning activities in much the same way as we also include things like wildlife interpretation and visitor experience. This helps us to plan for better experiences for our park patrons. It helps us to prepare to make changes to the physical layout for everything from parking to signage to new acquisitions of parklands. Related to all of that, another thing that we've been working on is the park equity mapping tool. There have been multiple collaborators associated with this. The University of Maryland School of Public Health is one of them. The Maryland Environmental Justice Screening Tool, Maryland Climate Change Commission, and the Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education. This has led to a great source of information for us, and we are integrating this tool into our facility planning and will continue to do so. This should be something that we should be able to work one-on-one with you, Mr. Ellis, and also with Charles County. And we would be more than happy to have individual discussions with your park facility planners in Charles County. But we are also particularly pleased with the Latino Outreach programs that we put in motion about 3 years ago. This system provides enhanced interaction opportunities at our parks that are tailored to our Spanish-speaking patrons. On a different but related topic, we work also with the Maryland Department of Disabilities and the Veterans Affairs to improve accessibility. In fiscal year 21, $125,000 was approved for ADA improvements at Susquehanna State Park Campground, and $265,000 was approved for construction for boating and fishing access at Tuckahoe State Park. We recently completed comprehensive ADA renovations of cabins, parking areas, bathhouses, and kitchens at Harrington Manor State Park, and similar improvements at New Germany State Park. We also we feel some level of satisfaction with the way our conservation corps have been operating. We have 3 of those. We have the Maryland Conservation Corps, which is an AmeriCorps-based program. It lasts 11 months in duration, and it enables us to have 35 young adults working in several teams across the state in parks roles. Very, very valuable job training opportunities for these individuals. And selfishly, it helps us identify some great future staff for our Maryland Department of Natural Resource facilities. We also have the Conservation Job Corps, which is a program that now has 2 parts, but the original part was a 5-week summer internship opportunity for approximately 300 youth between the ages of 14 and 17. Typically, about 200 of these young people came from Baltimore City. They had an opportunity to do park conservation and maintenance work. And it also included tremendous opportunities for outdoor experiences for some of these young people who may not have had opportunities to do these kinds of things before. And the second part, which we were able to put into play this year, was the internship for graduates of the Conservation Job Corps. And we are hoping that this may lead to a longer term program that could actually include an opportunity for these people to step up into employment with DNR. And then the final Conservation Corps program that we work with is the Veterans Conservation Corps, which essentially does the same types of things, but it targets returning veterans and helps to get them reacclimated and into the workforce. And that is also translating into opportunities for us to identify some really quality people that we can integrate into our workforce at DNR. So lots of good things going on there that we're attempting to make sure that the facilities that we have and the services that we provide are representative of and are available for all Marylanders.
All right. Did Senator Edwards have his hand up? Senator Edwards?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We got you, Senator.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go back, ask a question. I have a couple comments, if I may. What criteria was used back in 2002 to set a goal of 1,030,000 acres for ag land preservation? I'm assuming that's what that was for. What criteria was used to come up with that number?
That would jump back to planning's presentation if you have the answer to that.
Val Aslan's here. I just gleaned that information just from the information on the actual resolution. It doesn't get into the criteria or anything like that. So I really don't have a specific answer, but we can research that and get back with that information.
I think it would be important to know. I mean, did we just pluck that out of the sky, or did someone come up with some looking and say, gee, this might be a good number into the future? I think it would be nice that we had knowledge of how it was came up with.
We can do that.
Phil, congratulations there, Phil, on finally getting on board there at DNR.
Thank you, George.
I know you've done great work where you've been before, and you started out here in this neck of the woods and moved east. So took all that knowledge with you down there. Couple quick things on open space. Are we still using the 30 acre per 1,000 people scenario? I believe that's what it is.
Yes.
Goals of how much land in a county? Pardon me?
I believe that's correct. Are you going to advocate for a change in that?
I'm going to advocate for a change in the whole way we do the whole thing. And here's my reasoning. And I brought this up years ago. I've been on this committee ever since I've been in the legislature, and we've made changes throughout the year. And I brought this up before, and I'm not trying to be smart about it, but take some of these big metropolitan counties that have, well, Montgomery's 1 million people or more. Prince George is, I think, 900 and some thousand. So if you literally took this and said you have to have 30 acres per 1,000 people, at some point you'd have to start moving people out of the county to be able to buy land to meet the goal. I think we ought to look at the, and we've also changed in the local setting of goals, because there's, it went that you had to put so much in to buy land, and then we got in, you could use to develop your local park scenarios with the land you bought. It was a 25% local. Then we said, if you've reached your goal, and I forget, I've looked at this stuff for so long, and then we changed it. Now it's 10% if you've reached your goal. And if you reached your goal stays in place for a certain period of time. So to get back to the point, I think we ought, you all, staff, maybe in conjunction with this joint committee or whomever, should look in how we come up with the amount of land that each subdivision, each county should have as a goal, a minimum of a goal. Instead of this 30 acres per 1,000 people, you might say the minimum goal for Garrett County's 50,000 acres. Minimum goal for Montgomery County's 50,000 acres. I'll just throw them out, no particular reason, but and that's a minimum. You can get more than that, because you got to compute this all the time. And I've had people say, well, and And we got so many changes because of where I live, where state owns 25% of Allegheny, 25% of Garrett. You know, to make those keep buying more land, to me is a little bit much. But I know it's all computed into the state number, and the state can say, gee, look what we own. This is great. The state owns 10% of the whole state. That's nice. It's open space. But I think it would be more appropriate to take the time to look at each county and the state as a whole and say, instead of this 30 acres per 1,000 people, that it should be 1%. How you come up with it, I don't know, but that would be a minimum. So you could then actually do more than that. And I can tell you in the case of Garrett County, the local goal, when we said they could spend it basically all on development, after they hit that goal, they still buy land. So they're not going to quit buying land. I just think it'll be easier to do and easier to monitor and easier to look at. And then I do have one little nitpicky thing, which every once in a while comes up when I see maps of the state of Maryland. And this map we're looking at here right now cut off a little bit of the eastern shore, particularly Worcester County's cut off, and about half of Garrett County's cut off. I know the rest of you on here think nothing of that, but that gets in my crawl. If we're going to show a map of Maryland, just show the whole map of Maryland on these things. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll cool it here for a while. Thank you.
Senator, we would be happy to work with you as we develop the new standards for the LPPRP that we're going to be putting in place for 22. And we have made some substantial changes too, in terms of just sort of a blanket rule on the 30 acres. We look at other types of things such as, you know, proximity to other facilities and issues like that. You know, population density, et cetera. So there's lots of ways that we can incorporate some of these things and try to tailor these to the unique needs of various subdivisions. As you note, we would be happy to work with you and discuss these with you or with other folks that we should interact with. And we will not be, whatever we end up doing is not going to be something that we do in a vacuum. We will be working with other state agencies as well as MACO and local governments throughout the state.
Excuse me, if I could just clarify, I just got a note here from one of the staff members, was that the General Assembly established the 1,030,000 goal of preservation for the 4 programs back in 2002. So
Yeah, I know that. We did that. I was here. I was in the legislature in 2002. Question is, what criteria was used to come up with that number, 1,030,000 acres?
Well, that we can dig into a little bit more.
Thank you.
George, Senator Young.
Yeah.
Let's see, 2002, I think I was deputy secretary at planning and then DNR. And I know the General Assembly just didn't come up with those numbers. They were recommended. I got 2 dogs going wild here. Get out of here. But I know there was input from various groups and the formula was developed as to how much farmland they felt could be kept and how much was needed to be kept. And that involved all the departments and whatever. I don't remember the exact criteria, but it was put together comprehensively with a lot of groups and people involved. There's no magical number. That's just something that was worked up as part of what they thought could be done and would still be sustainable for the state. So it's the kind of thing that probably needs to be reviewed ever so often.
Yeah, Senator, I'm not getting on anybody or anything. I just think for purposes of as we look, and I think the person from planning brought up, they wanted to move the time frame to 2040. to reach that goal. So, okay, then what criteria was actually used to come up with the 1,030,000? Maybe that needs to be looked at
I
to
think,
get to the goal quicker. I don't know. That's all I'm asking.
I agree. I think those things need to
I
be
know.
reviewed from
Look
time
at
to
it
time.
some way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Hey, James, are you out there? James Mckittrick?
I'm here, Delegate.
I think Senator Ellis has another question or has his
Oh,
hand
okay.
up.
There we go. Senator Ellis.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Mr. Hager, circling back to my question to you, your presentation, you pointed that area. You will be redeveloping certain criteria standards when it comes to, the location of some of these program open space facilities. And so you invite me to reach out to you as you do that and bring our parks people in to talk. Is that what?
Yeah, Senator, so I'm happy to jump in here really quick. I know that this is something that you and I have discussed, on and off. It would be really great to connect with you, have Phil on the line as well. We can connect by phone or Zoom or whatever you'd like sometime next week at your pleasure, and we can go through
Okay.
catch each other up.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
James, where are you in the presentation overall?
I think we just wrapped up. So we just answered the final question.
All right. I don't see any other hands raised. Senator Young, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. We covered a lot of material and a lot of ground today, and we're all getting used to our new remote hearings. Makes it easier than driving all the way from Garrett County, I suspect. But I want to thank everyone. And this will close the 2020 hearing of the Joint Committee on Program Open Space and Agricultural Land Preservation. Everyone have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.